Wishart.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman, and I listened very carefully to his words, as I have done to the other, what we could only call Conservative hawks when it comes to issues such as this. And we've heard a few of the Labour hawks too. And what I'd say to the honourable gentleman, there's at least an intellectual consistency that runs at the heart of the debate and the points that he makes. We heard it all during high Thatcherism, where there was a real substantial threat and we actually knew what we were up against when it came to the Soviet Union. And we're now hearing it again now, where we don't know where the threat is, we don't know exactly what we're trying to protect ourselves from. I have no idea who these weapons will be targeted at. And I suppose even if we had a nirvana of world peace, we'd still have the Tory hawks arguing for their nuclear weapons and why they would be an absolute necessity and why the deterrent would have to be a feature of our community and our country. But I want to get back to what motivates us in here, because I know what motivates the hawks over there. I mean, they like their nuclear weapons, of course they do, and that's what they see as an important feature to this country. But for me, we all come to this with, I suppose, a set of principles, a value system, a set of range of beliefs that help inform us to make the important decisions that we have to take as public representatives, as legislators. This is our political moral compass, and it helps us determine our approach to public life and the important decisions that we take in this House. Nothing is more important to me than my fundamental belief, desire and drive to rid my country of nuclear weapons and bring an end to this absurdity, nonsense and madness of nuclear deterrence. Yeah. For me, it's an unshakable and imperative moral non-negotiable. And I would never countenance the factor or a feature of me agreeing to nuclear weapons being an ongoing feature of my particular nation. Mr Speaker, I am appalled that my beautiful country is defiled by the presence of these evil weapons of mass destruction 40 miles from our largest city. My lovely Scotland. Yes, I know what he's going to say, but let's get over with.
Because he said he's got a principled position. It's the one thing he's in politics for, to rid Scotland of nuclear weapons, but he's prepared to join NATO, which is a nuclear alliance. Would he also, in an independent Scotland that the SNP was a member of, one, join the nuclear planning group, but secondly, allow nuclear-armed submarines to visit Scotland?
Mr Speaker, that intervention was as predictable as it was. And it's like a stuck record. Now, I've been to Denmark. I've actually sold 250,000 records in Denmark with my previous group to try and describe and to tell the Danes, for him to tell the Danes that they are a nuclear power would be a gross... No, I'm not giving way. I've heard it so many times just now. Denmark, Norway, Spain... Canada, for goodness sake, got rid of American nuclear weapons and they're still in NATO. The honourable gentleman just does not understand it, and I'm not prepared to take an intervention. It's a stuck record that's going to be spinning round and round all day, and I think the whole House is absolutely sick of it. Now, Mr Speaker, my peaceful Scotland, host to the largest silo of weapons of mass destruction in Western Europe, that lorries carrying all sorts of parts to service and keep this genocidal arsenal roll happily along the roads of Scotland, almost unnoticed, untroubled with their death-maintaining cargo. Weapons of mass destruction, such as Trident, just sit so uneasily and angularly with everything I know about the fantastic values of my country, a country of social solidarity, of trying to promote the common weal, of strong community values. Yet my country hosts, places the biggest arsenal of genocidal weapons that we have in Western Europe. And I'm pleased that, of course I'll give way to honourable friend.
I'm for giving way. And is it not also the case, it's actually worse than that, because a previous member talked about the other nuclear installations around the country. And isn't it the case that there are convoys bringing these nuclear weapons through the city of Glasgow to get to Fastlane?
Well, I'm grateful to an honourable gentleman, because I heard, and I'm sure he's aware of these reports too, that these cargoes were being shipped through the city centre of Glasgow only as late as last week. And this is what we have to put up with in Scotland, is these death convoys on our roads. And Mr Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I'm so pleased that nuclear weapons, that Trident became a defining, iconic feature of the independence referendum, because the progressive voices of Scotland got together and assured that this was promoted and this was taken round the halls of Scotland as we were debating it. And I am so proud that I was on the right side of the debate concerning this. I would never side myself with people who believe in nuclear weapons and people who continue to support their case. But we're not even asking the House to scrap the nuclear weapons today. We're not even asking the House to reduce them. We're just asking the House not to agree to £100 billion worth of new nuclear weapons. Now, we use the terms like multilateralist and unilateralist, but what we're doing with committing ourselves to Trident Renewal is actually indulging in unilateral nuclear rearmament. We are adding to the stock of nuclear weapons worldwide, and it does nothing, absolutely nothing, for the ambition, as the Labour Party front bench say, to rid the world of nuclear weapons. It does nothing to try and achieve any multilateralism. So that's what we're doing today. We're asking the House to not agree to pursue with £100 billion of spending of weapons of mass destruction that could never be used. And this will be the second time in 2 weeks that front bench and their colleagues will walk through the lobbies with the Tories in support of this. Now, last week they committed themselves to £30 billion worth of austerity spending and agreeing with further Conservative austerity, and today they will march through the lobbies with the Tories to support them in terms of £100 billion worth of spending on nuclear weapons. Now, last week Labour said it was all a gimmick, and I think they've not described our debate as a gimmick, though I saw some reports of that today. But they're still prepared to support the Conservatives on both of these things. People are rightly asking, what on earth are Labour for? And we've got to hear exactly what people believe about what will be the biggest spending issue of the next Parliament. Now, already £250 million has been spent each year just for what is called the assessment phase, the lead-in phase to Trident Renewal. And some £1.4 million a day is now being spent on preparing for this weapon of mass destruction. And an estimated £1.24 billion has been spent on the project so far. Now, this just so happens to be the same amount as the Chancellor has pledged to find in the new money for the NHS. But we don't know how much this is going to cost. We say £100 billion. That was challenged by the Conservatives. But the Secretary of State refused to say how much this would actually cost. When he was challenged on this figure, we didn't get anything from him. So we don't know what the government's estimate is for the cost of all these things. And they talk about the main gate of the decision in 2016. Well, can I suggest to the Conservative front bench, leave that main gate slammed, closed, padlocked. This country does not want Trident Renewal as a feature of our community. And how can we justify spending so much money on an obscene weapons of mass destruction when we have food banks? Food banks as a feature of every community and every constituency in Scotland. Mr. Speaker, the Westminster establishment parties have barely been held in such contempt. The Westminster elite that run these Westminster establishment parties can barely get over 30% in the polls. And this only compounds this thinking that the Westminster establishment parties are so far out of kilter with what the public want, the everyday experiences of people in every single community in this country. No wonder they're in such low esteem, and in this House is being held in such contempt. And this motion today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, comes in the names of the SNP, the Greens and Plaid Cymru. What I think this is beginning to suggest and to start is this idea of doing something different, of an absolute challenge to the old failure of the Westminster establishment, Tory, Labour, Labour, Tory, austerity vote and Trident supporting. That's what we have. What we offer, the opportunity to people of Britain, is a different way of doing things, a progressive alliance that is not prepared to accept that we can just go along with £30 billion worth of further austerity spending and further renewal of Trident weapons. So I am pleased that we've got that, because what it does, I think, for England, for example, they don't have to vote for this Europhobic, immigrant-loathing, quasi-racist UKIP party. They have something substantial in my honourable friend here to support and vote for. And we've seen the results of that already, the Green surge in and neither wonder that only the Labour Party and the Tory Party want Nigel Farage, another establishment public school banker, as part of their features when it comes to these debates. And it doesn't surprise me that they'll do everything they can to keep my honourable friend off and keep the SNP out of these debates, other than the Prime Minister standing up, I believe, rather lately for the inclusion of the Green Party. So we have a real obstacle. But let's just see what these weapons actually do. Let's challenge and test some of the assumptions of my friends, the Conservative defence hawks, who just enjoy their nuclear weapons so much. Because we've heard it today, and they were actually unashamed about it, that having these weapons of mass destruction, having these Trident weapons, was necessary for a virility symbol in the world, that it allows us to be part of the P5. As if the British people cared the least bit about any of that. The British people care about spending on their NHS, on education. They are concerned about food banks, being able to sit with other nuclear powers to play with their toys. Now, I don't think that is what the British people want, and I'm beginning to see that in opinion polls here. And we're told that this would work because of all sorts of external threats. Well, let's look at the external threats. Already we heard some really, really dodgy stuff about the possibility and prospect of using them on the Ukraine and having them as a feature in any sort of discussion and debate. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman. Yes.
Grateful. I'm most grateful. The point is this. If France and Britain and America do not dominate the P5, who does? There is always talk about other powers coming onto the P5. If India, maybe less savoury countries, came onto the P5, would that be good for the British security and the democratic world? No, we're there for a purpose, and it's to serve the democratic world, and we do it very well.
This is what's different between the Honourable Gentleman and myself. He actually believes that that's important, where I couldn't care less about that sort of thing. And I believe increasingly the British people couldn't care less about this. When we are struggling, when there is real need, when there is real deprivation, when there are Tory obscenities like the bedroom tax, does he honestly believe that people in their Honourable Gentleman's constituency in Paisley actually care less that they could sit around the table with the big boys with their weapons of mass destruction? No, I don't believe that is the case. And I think the British people are beginning to wake up to that very, very thing. And to tell us that defend us from these threats. The biggest threat we have, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is from IS, from jihadists. They would be almost delighted if we threatened them with weapons of mass destruction. They would celebrate, they would punch their air because Britain would be turning that on. They would actually appreciate and enjoy that. This is a weapon system designed for the Brezhnevs of the world, not the Bin Ladens. It is a Cold War response to a Cold War situation, and it is ill-equipped to deal with the very real issues that we have in our community, the external threats that we face. North Korea, a cartoon caricature of a totalitarian state. Are we seriously saying that we'd contain these nonsensical states with nuclear weapons? And then, I don't even know whether we're an ally of Iran this week or an enemy, such as the state of our continuing flowing with all these former friends who are now enemies, who are now new friends. We can't keep pace with identifying who these external threats are. But the only thing that we have to have as a consistent is nuclear weapons to threaten them. Now, if there was ever a logic to nuclear weapons, and it would be a perverted logic if there was this idea of mutually assured destruction during the Cold War, that we could kill all of you guys because you could kill all of our guys. We've heard a little bit about that today. But to think that that is an applicable argument in this modern age with the new variety of threats is absolute utter madness. So we're going to spend £100 billion on these weapons of mass destruction that we will never use, just so the Honourable Gentleman and his friends and his Conservative government could sit at the top table. This goes on top of the £30 billion of extra austerity promised to us from both Conservative and Labour Party. Now, people are talking now increasingly about a new alliance. The 30%ers, shall we call them, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, who can't get above that. And I think this is a realistic prospect, because this will be the second time in a week that they've both voted together on issues such as this. There is a new way of doing things in this country. There is a new alliance beginning to... I was about to finish, but I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman, because...
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. He's putting over the view that nuclear disarmament is a very popular thing. Can he actually say the last time when a government in this country was elected on the basis of nuclear disarmament?
Tell me about a front page in Scotland Today in the national newspaper which shows that 60% of the Scottish people are now opposed to nuclear weapons. That's in his constituency, in my constituency, and in the Honourable Lady's constituency there. This is now a popular movement which is beginning to gain traction. And it's up to the British people. Yes, of course I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
Can I just clarify the record, because I've seen the figures that he's referring to, and actually he has excluded don't knows from that poll, and less than half, not 60%, actually hold the position that he says.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. We've been through lots of opinion polls in the last year, but if she is so confident about her position, go out to the hustings, explain why Labour, Scottish Labour, is a nuclear party and why they're prepared to spend £100 billion. Now, she'll be doing that. She'll be going out, and I wish her all the best in trying to get re-elected on the basis of all of that, because there is now an alternative. There is a new way of doing things. The Westminster establishment and the Westminster elite that run this place are now beginning to experience real electoral difficulties. People across this country are recognising the old ways of doing things aren't good enough. Cold War weapons for an austerity future. That is what is promised by both parties, and that is what will be rejected at the next election.